So obviously my name's Peter Cross. I work at Valard Construction. I got a really great intro from Eddie LeCates this week. He showed you a little bit about the company I work for. I work for Valard Construction, and I work as a program manager, which is a fancy title for manager of the project managers. Basically, I'm a pain in the you-know-what. So FileMaker-wise, I was a FileMaker consultant for almost 20 years. Then I became an in-house developer at Valard. Then I worked as a senior solutions specialist, and that was perhaps my favorite title. It's one of those new titles that you have to look up on the internet to find out what they mean. Basically, it was just an in-house developer. And then after that, I became program manager. Essentially what I do, I look after the development of our time capture platform. We have a FileMaker app that is both desktop and on the iOS. And we also have a web application. And those three applications talk to one another and generate all of the time records that go into our payroll department and pay the nearly 3,500 people that we have working out in the field. So it's quite something. About me, I'm an endurance cyclist. I like to cycle long distances. I'm crazy. I love dogs. That's my dog, Darko. She's probably very depressed right now. She's been spending way too much time in the kennel this summer, although it is air conditioned and we have a heat wave, so it's not that bad for her. And I'm also the father of 2 girls. So, who is Valard Construction? I wanted to share with you something. This is really cool. We were lucky enough to have a partnership with Ford. We buy a lot of their trucks. In fact, we buy them so fast they can't paint them in time. And when they run out, they actually give us loaner vehicles to use while we're waiting for our trucks to show up. So they love us. All right, so about Valard Construction, we were founded in 1978 in Grand Prairie, Alberta. We're Canada's premier power line contractor. We do all kinds of stuff. We do power lines, we do distribution, we do telecommunication, and like I said, we've got 3,600 employees, and our user base it's over 100 FileMaker users at this point, and it's growing steadily as we deploy to the various departments that are in the organization. And then about me, of course, I kind of serve a dual role. I'm a FileMaker resource as well as a program manager, so I kind of help things along when people get stuck or they need answers on things. We are also part of a larger organization called Quanta Services that's based here in Texas. And together with them, we're a leading power line contractor in North America. Valard's built over 10,000 kilometers of transmission line in Canada. So as you can see, it basically covers coast to coast. There's a little bit missing there in Northern Ontario and Northern Labrador, essentially because that's wilderness. There's not many people up there. And globally, you can see a lot of the countries that Quanta and Valard are in, doing active projects there. There's actually a few countries missing in that diagram. We have offices in Poland, Hungary, I think Norway and Sweden as well. So it covers a lot of ground. So anyway, on to what we're talking about. The FileMaker virus. Does anybody know what the FileMaker virus is? Wow. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the FileMaker virus is kind of a beautiful thing, or at least a lot of people think it's a beautiful thing. And what happens is somebody gets their hands on FileMaker and they build a solution, bless their hearts. And it's a really great solution, and their coworker sees it and says, hey, I'd like to use that solution. And so they share it over the network, and then the coworker and the worker are using that solution, and then somebody else says, hey, I'd like to use that solution. And so they connect to it. And then pretty soon they have to go to IT and say, hey, you know what, we need FileMaker Server because so many people are using this program, it's become imperative that people be able to access it. Anyway, so one person starts using the system, it grows, and then pretty soon there's a demand on IT to be able to service this application that they've never even heard about. And IT people are like, what? And this creates a sort of a tension between the application and IT right from the get-go. But what happens is that there's such an operational need for that database at the time that it comes on IT's radar that really they have to cave and they have to start supporting this app that they never knew about in the first place and they're probably not too keen on. So my position on this is that the FileMaker virus is a good thing. We just have to be careful how we use it. Some of the things that you'll run into, and these are good flags that maybe IT didn't have good visibility on your software, or maybe the process of getting that into the organization wasn't handled correctly, is you might be hearing things like, oh, well, we don't have the budget, or FileMaker licensing is too costly, or we're looking at an application that's just like yours. Does everything yours does, except it's cheaper. So you can see that the virus works to a point. And then beyond that point, you kind of get stuck. Has anyone in here had a FileMaker virus story? One that's really icky? Yeah, me too. It's not pretty. We'll get back to those stories if we have time. After my video, I want you guys to see that video. So what happened to me? So when I started with Valard in 2013, I was fresh off the consulting circuit. I've been working as a consultant for about 17 years, and I loved building FileMaker databases. And one thing I didn't like was bureaucracy and rules. I was in for a bit of a shock. As I said before, we are a very large company, and we have a very structured IT department. And so let's just say there was a little bit of friction when I started, because I just wanted to build databases. And I saw the need everywhere to build these solutions and implement them. And so I started hearing those words. I started hearing the licensing's too expensive, right? It's too hard to deploy FileMaker. It's not an officially supported app, which I found confusing because the whole reason I was hired in the first place was to build FileMaker databases. So typically what I would do if I was an independent consultant would be to get someone to strong-arm IT for me. Because usually when I came in as a consultant, somebody had to approve my expense for the company. And so usually I had buy-in at an executive level that would ensure that IT would do whatever they were told by that executive. That wasn't going to work here. So what I learned was, in order for a solution to be successful, it has to be more than just an accurate articulation of business process. I mean, we all know, right? If you can articulate a business process, if you can automate something, and you can do that in a FileMaker app, you have a winner, right? But the key is, the way that solution is implemented into a large organization, the solution also has to mesh with the processes that control IT. And this is not something a lot of people know about, and it was kind of my learning experience. So I wanted to share that with you guys, and hopefully when you go to implement into an organization, you might have a little bit of background for what you might be dealing with. The key point is, different types of organizations have different types of policies that regulate both the information that they work with and the way they implement their technology. Like, I'm sure lots of people have done work with small businesses, right? They just do whatever they like, right? And I know a lot of my work as a consultant had to do with small businesses that had a very different approach to business. And because of that, they needed something custom. And that's where FileMaker is great, because you can articulate whatever they want in terms of process. However, when you get into a larger organization, they have more regulations and more controls in place about how solutions are developed. Who's in charge of process? Who's going to handle training? How that software is going to be implemented? Whose budget is that software going to impact? These are all things that need to be taken into account. Now, if you're a consultant and you come into a large organization, one of the things that you want to do is you want to let IT know that you understand and appreciate where they're coming from. This creates an open dialogue from the start, instead of this tactical relationship where you spend most of your time trying to get around whatever roadblock they're trying to put in your way. Because really, a lot of these organizations, The big challenge they have is they have a lot of audits that they undergo. They undergo things like security audits, financial audits, control audits, process audits. And if your software is implemented outside of those controls, it actually looks bad for them. It actually looks like they're not in control of their department. They have things going on with technology that they don't understand, and they're exposing the IT enterprise as a whole to risk. So really, that's where they're coming from. Like a good example of this is where I'm from, Vancouver, BC, there's a governmental requirement that if you're a private learning institution, like a post-secondary learning institution, you actually have to maintain the student records for, I think it's 5 decades. You have to prove that you can store those records for 5 decades. So you might get a call from a school and say, oh yeah, well, you know, we need a system for managing our students. And you're like, okay, great. You know, and then you get a call and they say, oh, well, we have all this data, it's slowing the system down. Can we just archive that somewhere? And you're like, oh yeah, sure, we'll save it off and delete all that from your system. And then you get a call in 10 years. What'd you do with all that data you took out of the system? So there's kind of there's an onus on the developer to actually understand those practices. And it's always good to ask the questions, right? Is like, what are the requirements? You know, get schooled, because a lot of these organizations, you know, they have a body, they have those practices in place. And if you're working with an IT organization, they're more than happy to spell them out for you. I got them preached to me so often when we have this control, we have that control, and you know, the more that you can comply with them, maybe you can't comply with all of them, and maybe you can negotiate the ones that don't fit, but the more you can comply with those policies, the better you look to that organization. The more clout you're going to have, the more they're going to see you as somebody who understands what they're doing. Your approach to those problems really reflect on you as a consultant, and what you're trying to build is that long-term relationship, right? And I've already talked about how you relate to, you know, IT policies. That's going to, in fact, impact your relationship, but also your understanding of things like SOX compliance. If you're working with an organization that has to have, you know, audit trails, or they have to keep track of, well, something as simple as version control, right? In our organization, whenever we release a new version of the software, we have to list out what's changed since the previous software. And I know as developers, quite often what we'll do is we'll crack open a system and they'll go, oh, I know about a bug. And they'll go and fix that bug. And maybe they'll think, oh, well, maybe nobody knows about that bug, right? And it's, you know, it's natural, it's compelling, right? You've got the system open, it's right there, it's a 5-minute thing, right? But the thing is, that needs to be communicated back to the organization that that's something that's been addressed. Because you don't know, maybe app support's been getting questions, you know, 5 times a day, every week for the past 3 months on that bug that got introduced on a fix that was there. Not only will it ease up their support, but they'll be thrilled that it's addressed. They can say, oh, that bug that was there, oh, it's not there anymore. We don't need to worry about that anymore. Right? So that communication is important, and also having version numbers so that you can say, well, between this version and this version, that particular issue existed, right? Or if there's another problem, you can trace back through those logs what's been changed in the system over a course of time. So this all seems weird for a conversation about the FileMaker virus, right? We're talking about the virus. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that we all have our own way of working. We all have our, the things that make our development process work, the way we like to work in terms of our FileMaker development, and the company has theirs, and they're different. They're going to be different, absolutely. The key to getting FileMaker into an organization is to adopt the things that you can't change. There will be some things about their process that will drive you nuts. I have this one client, like I don't take on clients professionally anymore, but there's a university that is near and dear to my heart, and they called because they went through 2 or 3 developers and they couldn't find somebody that they liked, and so they called the person who was originally in charge of the department, And she said, call Peter. He'll probably help you out. What could I do? So I helped them out. And so I did the update to their system. I got it all done. And I was like, oh, that was easy. That was fun. And I went to go put it back on their system. And then I remembered what really bugged me about working with this particular university. And it was that I had to take my file, I had to put it in a folder, and then IT would move it from that folder to the server when they had time. It was awesome. So anyway, I put on my, I'm an easygoing kind of guy, and so we had some chats with IT, and we said, well, can we just narrow that window a little bit? Could we kind of have a general heads up as to what time this is all going to happen? And it kind of got escalated up to the manager and all the rest of it. Anyway, at the end of the day, they decided that if they could do it at first thing in the morning, what a concept. If they could do it first thing in the morning, they could do it right away. And boom, it was up. And it was like a 10-minute conversation, and the result of that for me was really great because I was putting more and more overhead into trying to figure out how we were going to manage the outage window for the client. Because they're a university, it's a busy department, they're doing enrollment, right? And we don't want that file to be down longer than it needs to, right? So if you can be workable, you can really find compromises in that. But on the other side of that, there will be places that you get freedom. There will be places where you can run free, or they might have a problem they don't know how to solve, and they might turn to you and say, how best can we handle this situation? And those are the things that you need to capitalize on. So give it up where you can't, make it up where you can. It all boils down to the management of that relationship. And once you can establish that you're an expert in your position, you can get to the point where you can actually do with FileMaker rather than talk about what you can do with the FileMaker. Because sometimes when we're talking about what's possible in FileMaker, it becomes a bit of a, ethereal conversation, and it's very conceptual. But when you can actually demonstrate what you can do with FileMaker, that's where you get compelling results. So we've been through these different types of ways of relating to FileMaker, whether it's rapid application development or a low-code, no-code environment. It's agile, it's lightweight, and all the rest of it. All this, I don't know, I call it jargon. I'm a bit of a redneck when it comes to terminology. I was one of the people, I'm not the guy, but I was one of the guys that said to Andy, yeah, we need to do something about low code. These terms, IT doesn't buy this. It takes work to build an application. It takes requirements, it takes user interviewing, it takes documentation, and most of all, if you're in a rapid application development, it takes planning. And those plans have to be in writing, and those plans have to be agreed upon by the people who are going to use the system. This is the stuff that IT likes. They live for this stuff because it proves that you did your homework. And you don't want to have yourself in a situation where you're essentially promising something for nothing. Because when we say, oh, it's a rapid application development and it's agile, we run the risk of insinuating that we're not impacted by change. And in my experience, that's actually the greatest risk we have in FileMaker development. We can change FileMaker so easily. It's problematic. We've had systems we develop, and the people we're developing the system for, usually in higher levels of management, we won't say who because they're recording this, but they know you can change it. And because they know you can change it, they'll ask you to change it. And then they'll ask you to change it back. And then they'll ask you to do something different, right? And that gets back to the documentation. So if you do that planning, you get those requirements in place, and you manage the scope. I mean, sure, a little scope creep is okay, but when you're putting things into the file and taking things out, you're basically making Swiss cheese out of that file. And eventually, that file will break. It'll become corrupted, the passwords won't work, the printing will be all screwed up, and you'll be like, what's wrong with this file? And what's wrong with the file is it doesn't have any integrity anymore. So the more you can plan and deliver in small increments to that file, the better quality file you'll have. The key thing about it is we're trying to get traction. Because if you can build a system that is of quality, it is of substance, even if it only does a small thing, you will get traction. And when you have traction, then you can have influence. And when you have influence, you can start to build a system that matters. It's very difficult to walk in the door of the organization and say, oh, I'm certified, I'm qualified, I can build you an awesome system, and they say, go for it, right? So, in my experience, what I wanted was to find a place where the emerging technologies of FileMaker intersected with our business problems. This is kind of a magic spot, because sometimes you can find kind of the remnants of the past where someone's tried a project and failed, and maybe it failed because that technology wasn't available in FileMaker just yet. So maybe there was an emerging technology. These are what I call dare to be great moments. So, I don't know if you ever heard that joke by Steve Martin where he says, how do you be a millionaire and not pay taxes? And he says, first you get $1 million. Well, this is kind of like that. So the key to all this is, first of all, to build the relationship, right? Is you got to have that opportunity to really work with IT and the users to create an understanding of what their needs are and what their practices are, and kind of establish yourself as an expert, right? And so sometimes it's not easy to do that when you're on the outside, but when you get that opportunity, when somebody brings you into the enterprise, that's where you start. And you collect information. Because people love to complain, right? Am I wrong? No, okay, they do. So, and IT loves to complain, and they love to complain sometimes about software that other people have brought into the organization, and sometimes that's our beloved software. And the only reason they're complaining about it is because there's some other issue there that has nothing to do with you, right? But you can establish good practices, and that will make the impact. So yeah, so if you can find an opportunity where they have that kind of gap, you know, in our organization, iOS development with Objective-C was a big thing at one time before I got to the company. And so they rallied up the development troops, and they got an Apple developer license, and they got programmers in, and they were going to build a mobile app with Objective-C, and they spent 2 years trying to build that app. And the problem they had was every time that they would start making headway on the app, something would update in the iOS and it would break all their code. So they weren't going anywhere fast. And so I got asked if I could build a mobile app with FileMaker. Now, this was before the SDK. So I had a lot of caveats. It wasn't going to be pretty, but we could try. And I'll touch on that story a little bit more in a bit. But it's those key moments. Kind of further to that, don't forget that FileMaker can fit into the ecosystem. And quite often you can make, and my beloved client that was the university, they had a huge ERP that they just bought. They just spent, I think it was $25 million implementing PeopleSoft in the university. It was huge. And it left gaps all over the place. They couldn't report on which classrooms were closed. They couldn't report on, you know, when they change a room, anybody who was older than 65 years old couldn't register for a course. It was a field day for shadow systems. And the great thing is with FileMaker, because we integrate with ESS, we can pull that data. We can work with that data. We can create custom systems. And that data is already there. We don't have to define the structures or what it looks like, because it's all big data. It's keyed, it makes sense, it's complete, you know, and it's lovely data to work with. And sometimes you can find that as one of your opportunities and say, oh, hey, do you need a system that just tracks when you change rooms for courses? You know, they still use that system today. You can't beat it. So for us, there were some key technologies that really filled that gap. And the first one was Active Directory. When I demonstrated that you could integrate Active Directory into an app, like the light went on. And it was really funny because my manager at the time, he was brilliant. Like, he was a brilliant guy, and he knows Active Directory, he knows Windows security, he knows all this stuff. And I was like, oh, well, we can integrate it. We just have to go to the server, and this is where it goes. And he starts typing in the path for the Active Directory thing off the top of his head. And he hits the button, and boom, Active Directory's, active on that server. Like, just like that. And he's like, it's that easy? And I'm like, yeah, it's that easy, right? And so the light went on in his head, like, wow, like, we can really secure this app. Doing that meant that we could centralize the management of our user base through our application support team. We have a user access form that users have to fill in when they access a system, and that's approved by our app support team, and then their credentials get created. By integrating our FileMaker apps with Active Directory, it was no longer a security free-for-all, and that meant it could be managed just like every other app, and we'd gone up a notch. The second thing was what I alluded to before, is the ESS integration. Once we tie FileMaker in to other systems, we could lean on that data. We were able to create systems that were using data that had been created by other systems, and now we were building a workflow in the organization easily. And then perhaps the biggest piece for us was the iOS SDK. Once we were able to actually create a mobile app that we could distribute just like any other app, more importantly, have that custom icon on the desktop, we were away to the races. And then finally, it was being able to deliver on rapid application development. We were given a project to develop an internal daily reporting app in our company, and we were given a week to do it. We developed the website, the mobile app, the security, the integration, the testing, everything. Everybody in the IT department worked on delivering that one app, and we did it in a week. It was unbelievable. It was so cool. But the thing was, we had actually shown rapid application development. We'd shown what was possible. Instead of touting it, we delivered. And that made an impact in the organization. So how do you do it? Developer conference, the FileMaker community, user groups. Every awesome idea, every awesome app that I've ever built has all been based on something that I can tie back to a developer conference. Either it was something that I outright stole, thank you for those who provided it, or it was something that I looked at and said, that could be done better, that could be done different, or, and this is my favorite one, sometimes I would just decide that something needed to work a certain way. And I would go around and I would talk to as many different people as I could at DevCon until I either figured out a way to do that or figured out how to do something else that was equally as interesting, and then I would give up on my original idea. But the important thing is having that networking, and the online community and the FileMaker Developer Conference are huge in that. And then just one more note on that, which is know that you can do it. Never overpromise when you're in one of those dare to be great moments. If you're not sure that you're going to be able to deliver it, and sometimes like we get a hold of a new technology and we can't quite see to the end of that technology, we don't know quite what's possible yet, be careful, right? See if you can break that into a smaller project where you can get a total proof of concept, where you know you have your end-to-end and your unknown domain before you take on the big bear. When I took on that timesheet project, I knew it was possible. I'd been to DevCon, I'd seen the web viewers, I'd seen people doing JavaScript, and I just knew that we could do JSON communication using JavaScript in a web viewer. This was before the data API and before it was made easy. We wanted to do it the hard way. And guess what? I had to give up. They pulled the plug on the project because I couldn't quite make it work. But eventually, 6 months later, we came back, and this was around about the time the developer kit was available, and we were able to deliver that app. But the key thing is, I was very cautious to say that we could do it in the first place. So nobody was all that surprised when I said, you know what, we're not quite there yet. We'll figure it out soon. I'll just keep hammering away on it in the background until we can. So, and I suppose the key about that is being able to declare that as early as you can in the project. Don't wait until you're failing. Declare it as early as possible, because everybody is more open to having a conversation before you've chewed up 3/4 of the budget, right? When you're 3/4 of the way through the project and now you got to ask for more money, more time, or it's not going to deliver, it's a problem. But if you can do it in the first month, well, assuming it's a multi-month project, but if you can do it at the beginning stages of the project, that conversation's going to go a lot better. You're going to have a lot, you know, and see if you can negotiate on that. See if you can maybe shift that deliverable to the side or replace it with something else in the short term, because usually in FileMaker we can have some kind of workaround. And if you can develop that workaround and say, okay, well, this is what we'll do for the short term until we can figure that other piece out. But the important thing is you keep rolling on the stuff that you know you can deliver so that you deliver a complete app instead of having the project axed because you can't get there, right? I love this picture. So this is a project we were working on in Labrador. These are all transmission towers that are waiting to be erected. So these things, I think they're about 130 feet tall, and I think there's close to 100 of them spread out across the landscape, and they're just waiting for the foundations to be completed, and then they're going to be helicoptered into position, and then they're going to be set up. So the guys doing the assembly were way ahead of the guys doing the foundation work, because I don't know if you've ever been to Labrador, but the soil is bizarre. It's sand and rock, and there's just, it's weird. Just touching on those big moments. Also be sensitive to your clients. I had a client one time, they asked me how fast I could deliver a report. And I said, well, you know, I'm not busy, I could do it that afternoon. And I didn't know it, but that was actually a moment of truth with my client. And the thing that I didn't know was they had just been in touch with their supplier of a big enterprise DB, whose name I won't mention, and they've been quoted a 2-month programming contract to generate that report. And I said, oh, I can get it done in a couple hours. So something really clicked in the organization at that point in time, because the ERP and my system were working with the same data. So where do you think the bulk of their reports were coming from? And it was just a question, just like, oh, can you do this report? Oh, yeah, sure. You never know. I see I'm running slow on time here. This is another cool picture. Basically what we're doing is we're building a replacement bird's nest for birds that have been displaced by work that we were doing in the field. This is kind of like a while you were out renovation. So we have a lot of environmental regulations on the work that we do. We have to be very sensitive to what's going on in the landscape. We will literally stop construction if caribou come across where we're working. Everybody has to stop and move out of the way and let the wildlife go through. It's pretty cool. It's very Canadian. We're very polite. So I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to make a couple of points here. I've got a ton more slides. I've been talking way too much. A key point. How many people here do changes on live systems? Awesome. That was me. You know the client, they love the reporting? I did a change one time, and I changed a calculation that was unstored on a table that had 100,000 records. And you ever hear that thing where you used to be able, well, this is FileMaker 5, so this is a different world, right? There used to be a thing that if you went in to define fields, did one change, didn't touch anything else, and hit OK, FileMaker just might go through and not do anything. Not this time. It recalculated the entire 100,000 plus records. Luckily, we were close to lunchtime, but it's a very interesting point. And in my company, and in a lot of large companies, the development person is actually not allowed to touch the production system, right? So if you want to modify that system, you actually have to take it down, modify it, have an outage, and put it back up. So I've run over my time. I'm going to leave it at that, but I'll just tell you, honor the practices of the organizations that you're working in, and it will serve you unbelievably. Thank you.
So, excuse me, I'm what stands between you and lunch. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit quick, make sure we can all get to the great stuff they have set out for us. But my name is John Repp. I'm a small business owner, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've been using FileMaker. Very similar to what Peter talked about, except ours, you know, as a small business owner, as kind of the owner of IT, I'm able to really control the process and be able to do what I really want to do. Just real briefly about me, I'm a dad, an engineer, and a business owner. I actually have a degree in mechanical engineering. So FileMaker kind of started, you know, I hate to say hobby, but as an enabler for me to really kind of get in and do a lot of the stuff I need to do as part of my day job. Those who know me will call me a tech junkie, Apple enthusiast. I also do adventure motorcycling, and I love to do photography. Just a quick shot of my family. I have a wife and 4 daughters. Usually when I tell people, they're like, oh, sorry. I don't know why they say that. I guess they realize that I'm in for 4 college tuitions and 4 weddings, but we enjoy them nonetheless. Before I really start talking about FileMaker, I just kind of want to give a real quick overview of what is corrosion engineering, which is what my profession is, and then talk a little bit about Elzly technology and who we are, so you kind of understand why we need a FileMaker. So if anybody's ever heard the term, that's about as much fun as watching paint dry. That's literally what I get paid to do sometimes. We look at materials. We look at things that the environment is made of, whether it's vehicles, whether it's infrastructure, and we look at the materials they're made of and how to best protect them and keep them going for as long as possible. So we're trying to help people make investments, smart investments in maintenance or in new systems. So that's what my company does. We come in and we consult with these different organizations. A lot of the work we do is with the Department of Defense, but we also work with state DOT and other infrastructure owners. And we really help them to understand what their issues are, make smart decisions where they can on the acquisition side when they're buying a new system or implementing a new system, or how do they make systems last longer because they've bought something in the 1970s and here it is in 2018 and we're trying to eke every little bit out of that piece of equipment, trying to maximize the taxpayer dollar. So basically, whenever you see anything rusty, I probably am looking at that and trying to figure out how to make it last better. So our business case is probably very similar to a lot of other folks that have started to use FileMaker and have implemented different solutions. We are basically drowning in data. And the amount of data that we have might seem inconsequential to big companies like Amazon or something like that, but we're actually generating a lot of information and trying to make engineering decisions and recommendations to program managers who just want to know, well, what should I do, A or B? So we're trying to take a lot of information and really do a lot of analysis to understand what they need to be doing. And our data really comes in 2 flavors. I like to think of it as structured and unstructured. We do limited researching and testing and engineering programs where we're creating a sample. We're creating kind of the idealized condition of what the system's going to be. Usually it's evaluating a paint chemistry or a substrate material or a pre-treatment, and we're looking at very specific measures of that. Or sometimes we're coming up to a piece of equipment that we just say, find all the rust on this and tell me how to fix it. So we're either dealing with something very structured that very easily goes into a data sheet, can be easily put into Excel, or we're dealing with handwritten notes, folks' ideas of where corrosion's happening, and then, oh, by the way, here's the 60+ pictures I took of that vehicle, figure out where all the corrosion was. How do you link those together without going through it one by one and really trying to tag each one to an observation? So that's where FileMaker has really been good for us. We've been able to use it in a lot of our programs. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of how I started and where we're at today. And for me, it all started in Okinawa, Japan in December of 2011. I had actually gotten a copy of FileMaker as an undergraduate student, and it was a pack of discs, 3.5-inch floppies. I'm like, I don't really understand what this was. I kind of liked it because when I sold it to somebody else, they gave me a couple $100 for it. So that was beer money for college. But I had a project with the Marine Corps at this time who said, hey, go out and look at our MRAPs. They're the vehicles that are on the market now that we're using to protect our soldiers. They're doing a great job, but we're starting to have some issues with it. Can you tell us where the issues are, how we might maintain these, and what we might be able to do to really, keep them around as long as possible? So I've done this before. Again, take out your notebook, make a bunch of chicken scratch notes, a whole bunch of photos, come back, 3 weeks later, I have a report for the customer. But I had gotten a copy of FileMaker, and I saw that there was the app on the App Store, which was then $40. When you're used to downloading everything for free, it's like $40 for an app. Is that really worth the investment? Then you think about the software on your computer, it's like $40. Come on, just do it. So I built an app. I built something on my iPhone 3GS. I went out. I was able to collect information, collect pictures, and guess what? It failed. It really wasn't a failure of FileMaker. It was kind of a failure of a bunch of different things that came together. It was my first time really doing this, so I really didn't have a lot of experience. I was also trying to do a lot with the system, and I didn't realize that every time I was hitting that camera, I was taking a 3 or 5 meg picture and just inundating it with information. So the problem there, I think, was really more of a lack of experience on my part. It's really the first app I built, and I broke it, so it was a great learning tool. But it was also some of the hardware limitations. I was doing this on an iPhone 3GS. About every other picture would crash. But I'm like, wait, there's something here. There's something we can do here. This was also, back during the first generation of iPads, so they didn't have cameras, so I wasn't able to use that system. But I remember thinking, if this thing only had a camera, this would work a lot better. I'd have a lot more real estate. And I didn't have to wait very long. Only a couple months later, they came out with iPad 2. I got a camera. I'm like, wait, now I can really do something here. So I realized that the pieces were there, and that I was able to really kind of do what I wanted to do. Now I just had to figure out how to accomplish that. And so with that, I was able to build a couple apps. We have 2 main ones that we're using at our organization right now. One is for the inspection side, where we're doing our research, and the other is for our acquisition side, or our ground vehicle inspection side. So the first one, we do what are called test panels. And so this is very structured information. This is the data sheet that I showed you before. And what we do with these test panels is we evaluate different coatings, different systems, and we try to really understand how is it going to perform. This is kind of like a baseline, an initial screen before we take that out in the field and we actually put it on a piece of equipment. They don't want you going out and messing up their $1 million piece of equipment on a hunch that you have. You want to do a little bit of proof ahead of time to show that, hey, this is actually going to work. But this is a process. We had a lot of hand-collected data, a lot of photographs, and we're trying to put this all together into an easily reportable, searchable, formattable, evaluated format. Now, the test panel itself, it looks pretty simple. It's a rectangle. Matter of fact, if you lose a bunch of these for UPS, try to explain them what a test panel is. Best bet is to just say, hey, I lost a bunch of rectangles. They're made out of steel, and they're green. Can you find them for me? Unfortunately, they never seem to. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So we have to really understand what we're testing. We got to understand what materials we're using, what coatings, what primer systems, and how that's all coming together. And then what we're doing is we're taking it into an environment, we're taking it into a test, whether it's in the laboratory or out in the field, and then we're deciding what we need to measure, what we need to evaluate. So there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of different things that we need to set up. So, you don't just create one sample and stick it out. You create a couple hundred samples, so you get replication. You can see, is that one measurement really an anomaly, or do they all look like that? So a database and a FileMaker app really lends itself very well to that, because you can have relationships. You can have every information you need to know about your project, about your sample, then about the test it's going into, and then about the measures that you're making. So it's really a good opportunity for us to leverage that for what we wanted to do. So that's basically what I built, and what we've kind of iterated over time to create something that works very well for us. And now we're having some of the people that we work with, the organizations like Army Research Lab, Naval Air Systems Command, actually asking us, can we use that? We want to implement that for our test programs. So it's been pretty exciting. But with this one tool, now I've replaced my data sheet, I've replaced the need to do data entry, and I collect my photographs, and everything is linked together. I also automate a lot of things, like where am I at? Where am I actually looking at this piece of equipment? Because sometimes I have standard locations, sometimes I'm doing something specific at a site like a bridge or something like that. I have drop-down lists. Some of the ratings we do, they're just 0 through 10 ratings, so why do I have to type that in every time? Just a quick drop-down list will show me what I got, and then I even prompt the user because that list correlates to something else. It correlates to a percentage or a visual standard. So I'm able to cue them to make sure that they're giving it the right rating, that they're not just using their memory. We also automate data entry sometimes, especially in the beginning. We don't see anything. It looks perfect. So why do I have to do, type in a bunch of 10s or 0s or whatever the case might be? I just hit a button and it fills the whole thing out. Whereas before, I have to write all that information in to show that, hey, I really did look at that. Sometimes our data is repeated. We do what's called a scribe, which is a scratch through the coding. Anybody who's had a car and somebody walked past it with a set of keys and accidentally scratched it up, or maybe they did it on purpose. That's basically what we're doing. We're putting a scratch in our paint to really understand how it works. So a lot of times that happens very uniformly, and we're just hitting 0 or 1 as far as the amount of degradation that's going on. And then lastly, we provide them some summary calculations so they can quickly see, hey, what's going on. Also, it shows max and min. So, if you have something that's very uniform, also you have a big number, maybe I double tap the number or something like that. So basically what we've done is we've taken that data sheet that we had before and we moved that all into FileMaker. And we made it so we're not only just capturing the data, but we're doing the reporting, we're doing the data transcription, and we're tagging the photo to it, which is the big part of the story because we want to be able to show what that looked like, not just report on the data. The other main use of FileMaker in our organization is for vehicle inspections, and this is what I call unstructured data. It's not that it doesn't have structure, it's not that we don't have standards that we report to, but the fact is I walk up to a vehicle, like walking up to your car, I don't know where corrosion is going to happen. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know where the paint's going to be peeling off. So I need to be flexible to go to anywhere on that system and say, hey, this is where it is, and document it and be able to show a photograph of somebody. That's what our customers really understand. They understand the data depending upon what level they're at, but if you can show them a photo, they're like, oh, wow, I really need to go and take a look at that system. So we do this at the vehicle. We don't ask soldiers or Marines to move our asset or move their asset for us. So we're doing it out in the sun, out in the cold. We're crawling all over these systems and so on. So we do have buckets that we collect the data in, just so we organize it and so we can track things back. So we start with a very broad overview of the vehicle. We got to collect the information that lets us know what we were looking at, what the serial number is, so we can track it back. So it's no good if we go and find all this information, but we're not able to tell the person who ultimately owns that truck or owns that tactical vehicle what ones were a problem, what ones weren't. We then walk around. We go to all the different areas. We do driver side, passenger side, front, rear, top, undercarriage, and interior. We don't leave any place unlooked at. So we want to be able to say where we were on a vehicle when we were looking at something. Because sometimes you're looking at something that there's just a ton of. Like if you say, hey, a fastener's rusty on a vehicle, where was that fastener? So we want to be able to provide them kind of the context of where we're at. And the last part is the part. And that's where we're really collecting the data. And that's where we're really diving in and providing our ratings, and we're really capturing photos and making sure people understand exactly what it is we're looking at. That's also where we're trying to demonstrate, here are the issues. Here's the, what's really going on with your system. And again, before, we had this information, we just couldn't get it all together because it was in paper records. Somebody collected this way, somebody collected that way. So it really allowed us to standardize it. So this is basically what our current workflow looks like. We start with the vehicle. We require that they take a picture of the identification information. Vehicles in the military have what's called a national stock number, or NSN. It's a 13-character digit, which unfortunately you do have to type in. So as you can imagine, it's pretty easy to, swap two digits, and then all of a sudden your data is meaningless. So having that photo, we can go back and we can reference it. We require them to take a minimum amount of information. We then allow them to go to the area. Again, minimum amount of information, part, minimum amount of information, take as many photos as you want, and then provide a summary for their overall rating. Just so you can see it a little bit better, this is what it looks like when we go to a vehicle. This is actually on a trailer system, which had a pressure washer on it. Again, we start with a picture of the data plate. We enter the NSN information, which tells us what type of vehicle we're on, and any identification information. And the person who's doing the inspection tells us that it's them. They then move on to an area to basically say, this is what the area looks like. This is where I'm at physically on the vehicle. So then when I go to my parts, now I know that part is tied to that area. I then allow them to do ratings, and everything is a button click or a drop down. We're not really asking people to type much except in the very beginning. Again, trying to make it easier, trying to automate the experience as much as possible. And this has been iterative. We haven't just kind of jumped into this. We, made a first version, and I had a couple of my guys use it, and they're like, oh, well, this works, this doesn't work. Can we make this? Can we make that? So it's kind of been iterative and allowed us to continually develop and improve it. Once they've made their ratings, they can take as many photos as they want. People usually take 2 or 3 just to kind of show what the system looks like. When they're all done, they've taken all their photos, they've inspected all their parts, they've looked at all their areas. We then give them a summary screen so they kind of know what they saw in the vehicle. It's kind of a reminder. So, you're walking around a vehicle, it takes about half an hour or so, maybe an hour on a bigger system. So at the end of that, you might not remember that you saw a whole bunch of stuff, on the undercarriage. Now you're up top and you're trying to do your final ratings. So we're just giving them kind of a quick understanding or reminder of what they saw. So basically what we've done is we've taken that chicken scratch notebook page, those 60 photos, and we've consolidated it down into an easy-to-use mobile app that our engineers, our technicians can go out, they can inspect the vehicle, provide that information back, and then we can present it in a dashboard so our customer can understand what they're getting, what they're seeing, what have we looked at more than anything else, and then they can drill down into it and find out where are the maintenance issues, where are the part problems that they're having. And again, this has been something that our customers really haven't had before. So they're very excited about just the opportunity to look at a lot of data. And again, it's not big data as far as big data is concerned, but it's big data for us. I mean, to date, we've looked at 8,200 vehicles, 120,000 parts, and we have 180,000 photos for those parts in the system. So it's something that they can go in and they can dive down in and they can pull out all these great photos. And they're not just like, oh, here's a photo of rust, but here's a photo of rust that's attributed to this system on this date in this location. So now all of a sudden it means something. It's not just a picture out there on a presentation. They can say, I can tell you exactly where that vehicle was and what time we looked at it. And so if I go out 6 months later, I can say, hey, has it progressed? Have they done something? Is it looking better? So with Elzly, FileMaker has really been an enabling technology for us. It's been something that allowed us to collect a lot of data, analyze it quickly. One of the things we do is basically these inspection trips, they're week-long trips. At the end of that, we give an outbrief. So we quickly have to turn around and provide data back to the installation that hosted us. So we want to be able to say, hey, here's the vehicle that you have a lot of issues with. Here's the ones you want to spend some time with. Here's the ones you want to go out and look at again because you might be having problems with them. So it's enabled us to rapidly report back to our customer or to the installation that hosted us, here's what you have. Then we can take that information and do a deeper dive. We can say, how does this look systemically, across the entire installation, and across the entire vehicle population fleet, and across the entire Army, and really say, hey, this is where you guys should be spending your money. Or these are the things that are lacking. These are technologies you can invest in. So it's been a great enabler of those conversations so they can go out and they can say, we're having all these issues on these trailer systems. We really need to do a new program buy for that. It greatly has improved consistency and reliability of our data. So now we don't have to worry about people doing things differently. Everybody kind of has a different eye, but at least they're making the same measurement and they're reporting it in the same fashion. And it has been a continually iterative and evolving process. I mean, it's really something that, I kind of made and it worked great for me, but I really, as I got other people involved, it's really kind of expanded. And one of the things that also has helped me greatly is coming to the local user groups and to DevCon, because I always get other ideas and other thoughts and other things that I want to put in to that program. And so it's been really great. And with that, some of the things that we're looking to probably do this year is take advantage of some of the FileMaker 17 enhancements. One of the things that our folks don't do is I don't allow them to go back and edit what they've already entered, just because I don't like to do that. But these are also engineers, and they know exactly when they made that error. They're like, oh crap, I hit driver's side, I meant to hit passenger side, but now they're on the passenger side and they can only select driver's side. So allowing them to go back and change that name from driver's side to passenger side is actually for me, because now I don't have to go in and find their handwritten or their typed in notes to say, this is really driver's side, go find the passenger side and make that driver's side. So now I can correct that error or they can correct that error as they go. Also allowing them to do some error checking of their own data. That's something that I spend a lot of time doing, is just making sure everybody's using the same terminology and everything kind of looks the same. Variables and dialog boxes is going to help when we search for things. And then the get sensor function, unfortunately, the steps doesn't work on the iPad because we have a bunch of young, competitive folks who would love to say, hey, look, I walked 3 miles. Oh, you only walked 1.5 miles. You're slacking. But the battery life and things like that are going to be important for us because, you know, our folks are out there, they're using the iPad in the sun, they turn the brightness up, and then at lunchtime, it's like, oh crap, I only got 30% left. So prompting them to say, hey, you got 30% left, plug it in, get out your battery pack, is going to be something that's really good for us. So the last 2 slides are just kind of the standard slides. I'm told that the presentations will be uploaded to the website. They're just, you know, going to get that up probably a little bit after the conference. And the last one is the evaluations, to remind everybody to do their evaluations. And I have a deal for everybody in this room. They do their evaluation and they give us a 4 or 5. I will buy you a free lunch. It's down in the convention center right now.